Hello and welcome to Cook With Me Live, another session in the kitchen together, hopefully feeling like you and I are kind of in the kitchen together having a bit of a chat. That's what I'm picturing anyways. Welcome guys, thanks for coming back, and those of you that are watching for the very first time tonight, I'd love to have a little hello from you. So please let me know, I guess, where you're cooking from, and or if there's anyone in the kitchen cooking with you tonight. I always love hearing, I guess, who the little helpers are in particular. So I've got something kind of extra cool for you guys tonight in terms of spice, flavor, I guess something that I find to be quite a favorite meal or quite a favorite cuisine for a lot of people, exploring the lovely world of Indian food because of their exquisite ability to create flavor, especially through spices, whole food spices. So it lends itself very well to a whole food based diet, and would love to show you guys today a little bit about that spice making ability, if you will, how we can use spices for the best of their potential, and also how we're going to incorporate a lot of other veggies into a seemingly simple dish. Now, yes, this is still Ashley-fied, as in I'm adding a lot more vegetables than is tradition in this type of dish, and that is maybe a little bit because we can, and because we have them available, and because I'd love to get more of them into you and use this as a perfect reason and a perfect method in order to get that into you. So welcome guys. Those of you that are still logging in, just give me a little hello. Let me know who's online tonight with me, whether you're cooking, whether you're just watching. I always love hearing that as well. And otherwise, we're going to get stuck in. I got a couple of little bonuses too that I want to show you guys in with this recipe that aren't exactly planned on the recipe, and we'll take it from there. So first things first, if you guys are ready to go, give me a little hurrah. Let me know. It's all good. Welcome, Jody. Thank you. You're going to cook tonight. Awesome. Very cool. Mandy, just watching. Just got home from work. Welcome, Mandy. Thank you. And Jan. Awesome. Haven't seen you in a while, Jan. Good. And you're cooking at the same time. Very cool. All right. So, guys, at first, it's good to be soaked, have your rice soaked in advance, okay? Now, I get a lot of questions about this, and we do cover this a lot more in my program. But it is good to pre-soak your rice. Now, interestingly, this was only 1 2/3 cup rice, and I put what I thought was a fair amount of water. And I sometimes just catch myself that different types of rices absorb different amounts of water. So this has almost risen above the level of the water already, just because it's absorbed it all. So you can see how much is there, and you can imagine that started off with only 1 2/3 cup of rice. So it's expanded a lot. And I guess this is a bit of an FYI. The different rices that you buy or the different type of basmati that you find, they might all behave a little bit differently. So even though I've called for the 1 2/3 cup dry measure and then the 2 cups of water, you might find you need to adjust the water amount just a little bit, depending on the type of rice that you're using, okay? The more white a rice is, as in naturally either it's a white rice or it's been more heavily processed, I guess the less liquid it's going to need. So in the world of rices, it can range dramatically. All right, now I've chosen a golden basmati, which looks a little bit like this. Okay, so literally it's just got more of a golden color than a white color. And that's one option. You can also get a hold of brown basmati. May or may not be the same actual grain. I'm not 100% sure on that, if it's just a terminology thing. But yes, so I buy a big, huge bag of golden basmati from my local Indian store. Most people should have access to that in a roundabout way, or maybe an Asian store will have stock like that as well. And yes, my preference is to the golden or the brown generally over the white. I prefer a little bit more, well, maybe I guess you could say a little bit more texture to the rice, a little bit more dimension, if you will, and hopefully a little bit more nutrition. Okay. So first steps first is we're going to take we're going to drain the soaking water from the rice. So grab your fine sieve or your colander, and we're going to let that all drain out. And we're actually going to kind of scrape this all out because I'm going to use this same pot so that we can do less dishes and start off the process with the cooking of our rice. Okay, so we're going to start the process off before we put the rice back into the pot. So leave it drain. Okay. And then if you guys are ready, we're going to head on back to the stove with all of your spices, a little bit of oil, preferably a safe high heat oil, although we're not going to go super high here, so you could get away with olive oil. And we're going to get that going. So come on back, guys. And that's all we need to do. Let's come back. Okay, so the process now, When we start to use spices and when you start to get really into your spice collection, eventually your drawer might end up looking a little bit like mine, but maybe not. I just love the flavor and the health benefits that come from using really fresh spices. So first steps first is we do need to get this pot of ours hot. So if you have a selection between two sizes of pots, start with your smaller pot for cooking this rice, and we're going to leave a lot more working room for the pot that we're going to put the vegetables in. Okay, so let's get that on to the heat. We don't have to go full high. Let's go maybe 7. Start getting that hot. Okay, and because I want to kickstart, I'm going to act really quickly. I'm going to crank it up just for a second here. So let's start off with about a tablespoon of your choice of oil. So again, that could have been a coconut oil. You could use an olive oil. You could even do, I guess it's not super traditional, but if you had just an avocado or a peanut oil, those are also good at high heat as well. So some of you may know already that I am traditional to an extent, but I'm okay with making modifications for purpose. So in this case, yeah, we're gonna add a few more veggies. We're gonna use a few different ingredients. And I apologize if I offend anyone's cultural tradition on how to make a proper biryani rice. The intention here is to, I guess, provide the same sort of flavors and the same sort of experience as what we'd have with that, and hopefully make it look nice and yellow along like the traditional biryani rice as a yummy dish, whether it's on its own or as a side dish. That's the intention. Okay, so we've got the oil starting to melt down there. Now, we want to make sure that the heat is under control so that when we put our spices in, we don't get burning spices. So you have a couple of options here. The safest and easiest way is going to be to keep it on sort of a medium heat. Then our spices aren't going to burn. If you're in a rush and you start to crank the heat up, you might need to have a little bit of water on hand so you can cool it down, pour some water in, and watch the steam if that's the case. But you can pour some water in to cool the pot down if you happen to get it going too quick or quicker than you imagined. Okay, because we don't want those spices to burn. Otherwise, it'll create quite a bitter taste in your dish. So that's the first thing that we're going to look out for. Okay, so we've got our oil melting in there. And this is particularly important when you're using ground spices. So if you were using whole grain spices like cumin seeds or mustard seeds, then you have a lot more flexibility with that, okay? So when we're using ground spices, we need to be more careful. So this is garam masala. Now garam masala you can get pretty much anywhere nowadays. It is a combination of other spices, and it depends on the recipe, what they're going to include, but it's some of your more quote-unquote sweeter spices. So your cinnamons, your cloves, sometimes your gingers, and then a selection of other things, okay? So believe it or not, it is going to all come together as delicious and yummy within this. You won't be tasting those individual spices. I've got a bit of turmeric here. Now I've called for between sort of 1/4 teaspoon and 1/2 teaspoon. I'm going to go the half because I like this quite flavorful, and any opportunity that I get to add more turmeric into my life, I try to do that just for, you know, an anti-inflammatory reasons and because I think it's good for me. Also a bit of curry powder. Now this is going to vary dramatically depending on your curry powder, the one that you've chosen. If it's quite spicy, you'll need to kind of do that accordingly to your tastes. I've called for about 1 teaspoon. I'm going to put just a touch more because I love it really quite strong and spicy. Okay, and if you'd like to add a little bit of chili, you can do it here or into the veggies. So this is just a little bit of, I think this one's called Kashmiri chili. So I'm just going to add a little bit of kick to this because I love it. There we go. All right, so we want to stir those around, okay? And we're also going to add a bit of salt to this mix as well. So we want to make sure we've got enough oil that they don't go dry. And if you don't, you can either add more oil or a bit of water, like I said. But we just want to kind of heat these spices up a little bit before we put the rice in and do a dry fry with the rice. So along with that, let's get about 1 teaspoon of salt in there too. Again, it might seem like a lot, but keep in mind this is going to make a fair few servings with this, and it's not actually going to, it's not intended to make it taste salty per se. It's intended to bring out the other flavors within the dish. Okay, so we've got a bit of heat on those spices now. Last step is to get the water ready. Now, if you want to speed things up a little bit, you could even pre-boil the water Don't have to, you can just let it boil, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to pre-boil the water. And I've got these little saffron threads here. Now, I don't know if you can see that up close, but saffron threads are, I'm trying to remember the name of the flower now. Someone's going to have to help me out on this. These are the little stamens, like the little, where the pollen comes from the flower. And I'm trying to remember, it's not the chrysanthemum. Can't remember the name of the flower. If anyone knows that, feel free to type it in. It's a little pop quiz. I should have said, here guys, here's a pop quiz. You tell me. It is quite expensive. Don't feel like you need to get it. It's not super critical. It's mostly for color. I think for specialness. And because I've had this on hand and it hasn't been used fast enough anyways, I'm going to go a bit generous on my saffron threads. Okay, and we're just going to put it into the water before we put it into the rice so that we get a better chance of getting that beautiful yellow color come through it. So I did observe that this type of rice in particular absorbed a fair amount of water compared to maybe previous rices that I've used. So I'm going to put just a hair less than the 2 cups. Oh, Jan, you're so right. It's a crocus flower. Thank you. I couldn't think of the name. That's very helpful. Thanks, Jan. So we're going to let that sit here with the strands of the saffron, and you'll see how bright yellow this water will become here as it sits. All right. So don't forget about those spices. If you've still got them on high heat, we got to be watching them. And now you'll be ready to add your rice in. Okay, so go and get that from the drainer. All of your strained rice. And we're going to put that in and give it a bit of a dry fry, as in we're going to stir it around and cook it for a little bit before we add the rest of the water. Okay. So you want to get all the rice coated in that beautiful spice mixture that we've started. So we get that nice even spice distribution throughout the rice as it's going to cook. That turmeric is going to get even brighter in color as it simmers down with the water when we add it. And this is the basis of a spiced rice. So whether you're making a pilaf, lots of times they're called pilafs, it just means like a fancied rice. You can add your spices straight into the cooking process of the rice so that your dish is more likely to taste delicious right from the get-go and not have to rely on everything that you put on top of it or serve with it. So this is kind of another principle that I work with people on, and the idea that if each part of the dish tastes amazing, then likely when you combine parts, it's going to taste good too. So we're going to put this spice effort into the rice as we cook it. Funny enough, that's actually quite similar to how much effort people put into making a roast taste amazing, isn't it? You know, I've heard you cut the slits in it and you shove the garlic things in it and you stick the rosemary sprigs in it and you sprinkle the thyme on it and you do all these things to make a roast taste delicious. It's kind of similar in terms of, you know, building our rice dish. Okay, so we've kind of got that dry frying. We could have cranked up the heat a little bit and really given this a good nudge here before we add the liquid. That's going to kind of act to sort of, not officially toast it, but it's going to give an extra amount of flavor to the rice. So that is another option, is to give it a good little fry off here before we add the liquid. But either way, once we've got the spices coated on the rice, then we're ready to add the water. So we're going to crank it up to full heat. Okay, we're going to add our nice bright shiny, look at that, bright shiny water with our beautiful crocus stamens in there, aka saffron. And the key here is within having the appropriate amount of water added, is that even if you get delayed in the making of your dish or you get distracted and you go away and forget about it, it's not going to overcook. Okay, so this is a big difference that I think a lot of people miss out on or don't take advantage of when they cook their rice, and that's probably why a lot of people like rice cookers actually, is because you can kind of set it, forget it, walk away from it, and whenever you're actually ready for it, it'll still be nice and hot. So as soon as this comes to a boil again, we're going to be dropping the heat to the lowest heat setting that you have. If you're using a gas stovetop, you'll have to move it to the smallest burner as well, because we want the lowest heat possible that you can get. We're going to set it, forget it while we make the rest of the dish, and then by the time we're done that, it should be ready to go. Especially because we've soaked it, this is only going to take maybe 15 minutes to cook, if that. Okay, So we're not quite, well, it's pretty close. We are at the boil again. Okay, it's not a rumbling boil, but we do have that happening. So now we're going to turn that heat right down, making sure that the lid is on, guys. Okay, so we do not want to disturb this lid. So don't be those curiosity killed the cat and go up and check it every few minutes. We need the lid to stay on so it can absorb and cook all the way through to the top layer of the rice. So don't move the lid. Just make sure everyone got that. Okay, next step is we're going to move over to the veggies, and then we're going to come saute them and build the rice that way. So let's start cutting up our veggies. I'm going to do a little experiment here with you guys too. Well, remember how I usually cry in front of you every time I'm cutting onions? I'm going to put this candle trick to the test here. So bear with me one second while I get you guys your questions organized so I can make sure I can ask those. Okay. How are we going? I forgot to say hello to everyone else. Belinda, hello, welcome. Glad you're online. Helen, your first time. Well, welcome, Helen. Hope everyone makes you feel welcome. Lindy and Lyndall, you're cooking now. Excellent. With Grant. Renee, my goodness, it's been a long time too. Haven't seen you in forever. And Lisa, hello. Michelle's watching. Danielle's watching. Thanks, guys. Awesome. Okay, so I'm curious to have a bit of a vote here. Who votes that the candle trick is going to help me not cry when I cut the onions? If you vote yes, type in yes. It's going to work, right? If you vote no, that it's just a load of bollocks, then type no. Because I don't know, guys. This is literally, I had this idea just before we went live, and I figured, well, why don't we try it? So this is a lovely candle that my beautiful friend Danielle gave me. So Danielle, I'm going to do double wick burn just to test this. We're going to myth bust this and see if it's a myth or if it's true. So I've heard that the candle flame has to be near enough to the cutting of the onions so it can burn off the acid before it gets to my eyes. So we're going to see. I'm not going to look at your guys' votes yet. I want you to put them in, okay? So you're either voting yes, it's going to work and it's going to help me not cry, or you're voting no, it's not. It's just a load of crap, basically. Okay. So we need 2 onions, and we got to get them cooking straight away because they're going to take a little bit of time. So 2 onions, 2 medium onions, whatever you've got. If you absolutely love onion, you can go bigger or more of them. That is perfectly okay. I guess I got to be cutting it closer there, don't I? Okay, here's the test. We got to cut a lot of onions. Those of you that are using a Thermomix at home, you're probably just laughing your head off right now because you're thinking to yourself, oh, I'll just chop mine in the Thermomix. I don't have to worry about all this that she's going through. And that's okay too. But for science, pure science sake, I'm going to give this a go because I don't like crying when I cut for you as well. So 2 onions. In a pinch, if you didn't have onions, what else could you use? Any ideas, guys? There's there's a lot of options here. Onions are very traditional in the Indian cooking world. There's a lot of benefits to onions, okay, and there seem to be less stimulating for our mind. If you're looking at it from a spiritual perspective, they're a bit less stimulating for our mind than, for example, chili or garlic. Still considered one of those pungent, stimulating spices, but that's all right. So they're used obviously medicinally in certain ways, and they're used very frequently in Indian cooking. The trick that I did learn from a very dear Indian friend was to add salt whenever you're trying to cook and simmer down the onions, because it does speed up the process apparently. So whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I add it all the time and it does seem to work. So we're going to add that little bit of extra salt in with our onions to speed up that process. Okay guys, I don't know about you. Are you guys trying the candle trick with me? I'm starting to feel a little bit in the eyes, but we'll see how it's going to go here. I'm trying to be very brave. Going to get rid of some of these skins like I usually do before we start chopping. Geez, I really hope this works. All right. So chopping up our onions, nothing too special that we need here. We just need fine pieces. If you like biting into pieces of onion when they're sauteed down, then you can keep your pieces a little bit bigger. Okay. Maybe I should put this on this side of me. Burn it off a bit better. Let's try that. Okay. So let's just chop into the onions. Then we're just going to rock chop through this just so we can get some slightly smaller pieces happening. Notice how I cut the onions in half first, then peeled them. I find it's usually easier to get the peels off, and then it's also easier to cut when you can cut on a flat surface. Okay, so we're just going to cut through these. I must say, guys, I think I'm going pretty well considering how long I've been doing this now. I haven't started crying yet. I'm hoping this is going to work. That'll be like transformational. Is anyone else as excited as I am? Oh, I know, I'm a nerd, but it's okay. We all get there in the end. All right, so we've got our little chunks of onion, pieces of onion. We really just need to get them sauteing. I'm kind of delaying it here because I'm kind of really wanting to see if this thing's going to work, and so far so good. So who was my yes guessers? Renee, no idea. Mandy, no. Belinda, yes. Billy, no. Ooh, it's on. I heard the crying comes from how fresh the onion is. Oh, Christy, that's a good point, but I find every single time I cut onions, I cry. So I think I'm the perfect test case. So I will admit my eyes are a little bit stingy, but I'm not crying. I'm nowhere near the tear point, which usually by now I would be literally dripping with tears. So I'm going to give this like a, it's not really fair to go halfway, is it? I think I'm going to give this a win. I think it's definitely having the effect, but I think the key is that I need this flame to interrupt the acid before it gets to my eyes. I don't know, maybe the jury's out. What do you guys think? I'm a little bit teary now, so maybe it just had to push it a little bit further, but I think there's some truth in that. All right, I didn't really give you guys a definitive answer, but okay, this is the first tear, so maybe it's not working. Anyways, I think that was a fun experiment to do. Maybe it'll still burn off the acid in the air so I can come back to this. Anyways, okay, we need to go get this on the stovetop so we can start cooking it down. So we're gonna need a little bit more cooking oil in with that, and then we're gonna come back and finish chopping up the rest of the bits, but I am gonna add the salt straight away so that we can hopefully cook it down a little bit faster. I think it worked. I think it worked. That was much better than it usually would have been. Okay, so we are gonna need that second saucepan. Let's turn it on to medium high. Okay, so about a 7. And then we are going to need that bit more oil. You can be a little bit more generous with the oil on this one, just because we need to saute down those onions as well as the other veggies. So I've called for about 2 tablespoons. It doesn't have to be quite that much if you don't want. That was maybe a bit much. Let's go about that. Okay. And we'll put that little bit of extra salt in now as well. About half a teaspoon. Okay. Let's chuck the onions in, get that happening. There we go. So that's nowhere near hot yet. So we're just going to let that sit and do its thing. And I'll come back and stir that once it starts having a bit of action here with the heat into it. So they can kind of sit there on that heat for a while. They're not going to get hurt. So let's chop up everything else, and then we're going to all have time to time this dish together. Now, in the event that you get a little bit ahead of me with your cooking, then you can also be considering if you want to have anything else with this meal for dinner. So I'm going to be having this as a big bowl of yummy biryani rice with a big extra pile of broccoli on top. So I've already cut up the broccoli. I've got it sitting in the steamer basket. And once I put the rice into the mixture, then I'll put a little bit of water in the bottom of that rice saucepan. It'll also help to clean it, by the way. And I'll steam the broccoli just before we eat. So that's something you might want to get ready in advance if you're having anything else with it. It doesn't really need it, but it's just an option if you'd like to do that. Okay, next up, the ginger and the garlic. Now, 4 cloves of garlic, AKA, or 1 big humongous elephant garlic in this case. So we're gonna get that guy chopped up. Again, it's a bit hard to crush this big, huge guy, but if we crush it before we peel it, it's a lot easier to peel. It does need a fairly sufficient crush though. So give it a good whack. There we go. Okay, so we've got our garlic. And you could either, I mean, if it's a nice big clove like this, you could even grate it. But I think it's just going to be just as easy if we just kind of plow through it here. Once it goes awkward, just flatten it out again, peel through it. There we go. And then we'll just chop it up a little bit more. Okay, we could go to the effort of fully rock chopping it. Okay, and then when it comes to the ginger, here's a little bit of a trick with ginger. Instead of getting a peeler out, it's usually easier if you can find kind of a sharp-edged teaspoon, and you just kind of drag the teaspoon over the ginger instead of fully peeling it, because I find vegetable peelers tend to take too much off. Now this works even better the younger the ginger is. Okay, so if it's quite old, this may not work. But it helps to also get into all the crevices, because the key here is we don't want to cut the knob of ginger off. Even though we're only going to be using part of this, it's easier if we keep it intact so that we have a handle to actually grate it from. Okay, so you can kind of just get in there and take off any of these skin bits that you don't want on there, especially in the crevices if you want to get picky about that. Okay, and then we still have the handle to grate it from. If there's any really challenging bits or bad bits, we can just kind of take them off. But then from this, we don't want any of this stringy stuff, so we'll just take that bit out. Okay, from here now we can grate it. So I'm going to be using the big grater side for the carrot, and thankfully this one also has a nice sharp fine grater. So I'm going to use the fine option for the ginger, and because I haven't cut it, then I have a handle from which I can safely grate this without getting my fingers in it. So as far as the ginger, we want about 2 tablespoons of the grated mash, I guess you could call it, roughly. If you love ginger, go a bit more. If you're feeling a bit under the weather, go a bit more. No one ever said they could have too much ginger, I don't think. It's even nicer when it comes straight out of your garden. I should have used that stuff. We've got it sitting out there drying at the moment. All right, so that's maybe not quite enough ginger. Probably could go a little bit more. And I can hear those onions. I'm gonna go give them a stir in a sec here. Don't forget about your onions if they're on. Thanks, Danielle. I had a romantic looking time while cutting them. Yeah, thank you. Wasn't feeling very romantic. There we go. That's enough. Okay, so we've got our ginger. You could at this point add them in as you go. So as you cut your veggies, you could add them in. It's more of a, I guess, an efficiency timing thing, so that everything's going to cook down in time. And if we cut them in the right order, then you'll be eating faster than you could have imagined, having to prepare it all at once. Okay, so let's go back and add this in. And we'll give those onions a stir as we go. And one little tip is you don't actually have to cook the garlic down as much as people think. So garlic is very volatile, as in it's precious, and it will reduce its flavor if you put it in too soon and cook it too long. So the idea with garlic is if you want to save a bit of money, don't put it all in straight away, rather than, you know, put it in a bit later in the dish, and then you won't have to add as much to get the same garlic flavor. Okay, so I'm going to let that continue on about a heat of 6. This burner is quite hot, actually. I might go 5. Then we can bide our time cutting veggies in case I chat a little too much. So next up, we need some cauliflower, some green beans, some carrots. Thankfully, these are all veggies that I needed to use up in my fridge at the moment. So sometimes I like making a rice pilaf as a bit of a fridge surprise dish, which you can do as well. Okay, so we've got a bit of green beans here. Now you can cut them as you like. Again, same principle applies that you've probably heard me say many times before, those of you that are seasoned veterans at this thing, is the more you like the taste of a particular vegetable, the bigger you can cut it. And the less you like the taste of something, the smaller pieces you probably want to put it into, so it's easier to kind of assimilate with the other pieces of the dish. Okay, so just do an extra little check on that. Got all the stemmy bits. Good. So you could just go through and cut this into little rounds, which is like the traditional kind of shape for a biryani rice. It keeps them the smallest pieces for the dish, nice little delicate pieces. If you wanted to do something a little bit fancy, you could cut them on an angle so they create a totally different shape. Okay, so check this one out. It's a little bit easier if you do them a couple beans at a time, but it's not too time efficient, so I'm going to do it like this. We're going to cut them on a really sharp angle, and still quite tiny, okay? but they're going to end up looking a lot longer because of the angle that we're cutting them on. So this is just going to give a slightly different shape and a bit of a different look and feel to the dish. You probably won't notice the difference in taste directly because it's going to be in with all the other overpowering spices. So this is just for aesthetics. So if that's too annoying or painful for you, stick with the first option. And those of you that want to get a bit fancy or practice your knife skills, that's something that you can practice. There we go. So 2 different shapes. I don't know if you want to zoom in on that, but 2 very different shapes in terms of how it's going to look. So it's just a presentation thing. And you can use that knowledge in future salads you do or roasted veggies, etc. So that should be about a cup, I think. About a cup. Don't worry about measurements on this, guys. When it comes to making savory dishes, especially like a rice pilaf, add as much or as little of each vegetable as you like. I'd rather you add more and make it so much about the delicious, wonderful phytonutrients that we're getting from these amazing veggies. The freshness. Okay. And our cauliflower. So between 2 and 3 cups of cauliflower. Substitutions for cauliflower. One quite yummy substitution, which is very uncommon, people might not think of this. Has anyone ever heard of celeriac? Some people say celeriac, but it's like a bulbous root, a very large bulbous root, which is related to the celery. Different though, it's not the thing that grows beneath the celery stalks, it's a different plant. And that's really yummy grated as well. So you could be putting a little bit of that in. You could be putting in a bit of grated kohlrabi if you wanted to get interesting. You could be adding zucchini, maybe some grated button squash, even maybe a bit of pumpkin, although that if you overcook that one, it's going to change the texture and it can go a bit mush. So you might just want to be careful with the pumpkin if you were to add that. So same thing goes here. If you love biting into cauliflower, you can go bigger pieces. If you want to hide it in with the rice, then go much smaller. But make sure the stem bits are fairly small. Okay? How's everyone going? Who's made biryani rice before? I'm curious to hear. Very cool. Okay, so hi Amesh, welcome on. We're cooking biryani rice. And I'm excited to have dinner because this is one of my favorite spicy dishes. All right, so if you're feeling caught up, you can start adding these veggies into there as well to start cooking. So you can stay right there, but I'm just going to quickly dump them in so that we can add and continue cooking that carrot, or preparing the carrot as well. And last but not least, let's get these bad boys in there. So they didn't really have very nice exteriors, so I am going to peel them. I don't always peel them. They were washed, so I will save these peels for my broth. They'll get added to my broth bag in the freezer, along with the tops and tails. But I'm not going to top them until I've grated them, because again, then you have more to hang on to with the grater. So just a bit of a trick. It seems like a habit. People tend to grate it, chop the top and tail off, and then realize that they're then going to have to squeeze hold it. There we go, so much less waste, okay, because you've got something else to hang on to. Helps having a really sharp grater too. If you find that you're consistently wrapping your knuckles with it, it's probably because your grater's not sharp enough, and so you're having to force it a lot more than you should have to. So that's a sign that it's actually not sharp enough. Now, I like to make this really fine, okay? So again, speaking traditionally, it is definitely about the looks of a dish as well. So we really want to chop through this and make sure that we get it refined up even more. So this can take a little bit of extra time just to make sure you're getting it down. Okay. Bring it back together, go again. You don't have to, this is a visual thing, okay? So if you love the look of the carrot pieces, then that's definitely an option for you. And so is this. I find the different graters make a big difference too. Had we just grated it finer, on the finer setting, we might have tended to make it a bit more mushy. Okay, so there is a difference between grating it fine and further chopping it than there is to grating it big and continuing to chop it versus grating it small. That's a fair bit of carrot, probably more than I called for. I love it. So let's add it in. Okay guys, come on back. Last step is going to be to add the sultanas to this mix so they can kind of soften down. And then we're going to maybe, would you guys rather I show you how to toast cashews or how to make a bit of a coconut sauce that would go on top of this? Suppose we could maybe do both. If we're getting really fancy here. Okay, so let's keep this momentum going. Some of the juices from these vegetables are going to start coming out here as they cook down, so don't feel tempted to add more liquid. If we add too much liquid here, then by the time the veggies do cook, we're going to end up with soggy rice, which is not what we want, okay? So we're going to let that cook down in time. And I didn't set a timer on the rice because when you've put in the exact amount of water that you need, you don't actually need to time it. You can just kind of go there once you know it's for sure been long enough. Then you can carefully lift the lid, but ideally not until then, otherwise we're going to end up with potentially undercooked rice. Okay, so we got a couple of votes for both and then the coconut sauce. Okay, all right, thanks guys. Yeah, you're right, it's pretty easy to toast cashews, mind you. If you've never done it, then that's not necessarily easy. So if you hadn't added your chili to this and you wanted to add chili, do that. If you hadn't already added your salt, make sure you've added the salt. And then any other flavors that you wanted to add, you can. So one option here is if you are going to be using the fresh coriander to sprinkle on top, and you love coriander, or even the mint, I'd recommend that you cut up a few bits of the stems of the coriander so that doesn't get thrown, and add it in here to cook with it, because I love that extra little bit of coriander with it. So that's another option here. You can cook that down with the other veggies. Okay, so while this is cooking down, I'm going to come back and stir it a couple of times, but I'm going to show you guys the coconut sauce that we can put with this. Thanks for voting. So I'm kind of doing this one on the fly. Traditionally, an Indian sauce such as this would be called a raita, but a raita is made traditionally on a dairy yogurt. So I'm definitely doing maybe blasphemy here, but bear with me. And sometimes there's garlic in it, sometimes it's lemony, sometimes it's got extra spice in it, sometimes it's just got cucumber grated through it. I haven't got cucumber, I do have lemon, and I do have spices on hand all the time. So this version of the coconut sauce is going to look a little similar to one of my favorite salad dressings actually that some of you may have seen already. But I'm just going to grab a little bit of coconut yogurt, however much you're feeling. We're going to put a bit of lemon into this so we can kind of almost make it like a sour cream almost, knowing that coconut has a fair bit of sweetness to it already, so it's not going to taste too sour. It is also nice if your coconut cream is a fair bit thicker to begin with for this reason. And you could have saved a bit of fresh garlic and really gone to the effort of really mashing it down if you'd like, but I'm just going to add in a little bit of powdered garlic. I don't want this to be the main flavor, but I do want it to change the coconutty flavor a little bit. So I'm just going to add in, it's probably about a little more than 1/8 of a teaspoon of garlic powder. Again, really nice just to have some of these things on hand at all times because they do keep. And then you always have options. Because I'm sorry, I didn't forewarn you that this was going to be part of the recipe. Technically it wasn't, I'm doing this on the fly. And I'm just going to add a little bit of cumin. Again, I don't really want it to be overpoweringly tasting like cumin, so I just want to add a little bit into there. Depends how much you love it. If you don't, you can definitely omit it. It's not critical. And a pinch of salt just to take away quite a bit of that sweetness that we're getting from the coconut yogurt, and just to bring out a bit of flavor. So just a little pinch of salt. Okay, that's it guys. That is all it is. So super easy to pull together in a pinch. Again, once you get organized, as in you've got your spices on hand, maybe you're starting to buy the coconut yogurt and using it for other things. If you didn't have the coconut yogurt and you're still having dairy, then definitely you can do this with Greek yogurt. It does need to be plain, and that is probably the best type of yogurt to be buying anyway, so you're not getting all the other flavors and sugars added, and then you can do whatever you please with it. So have a little taste. Maybe it needs a little bit more lemon, or maybe salt. I think I could use a little bit more lemon. That was quite a sweet lemon, actually. But that's all it is. So now this will allow you to go a lot spicier with your dish, because the cool fattiness, basically, from it is going to take away the burn or the heat from a dish. So it's a kind of a way to balance out a dish, is to add fattiness. And it's nice when it comes in the form of a cold yogurt, which is why that's traditional in India. So it's to balance out those dishes, those flavors on the tongue. Okay? Sorry if that's kind of, what's the word, underwhelming, but that's really all it is. And again, if you had some cucumber, you could grate some cucumber really fine into that. Make sure you get all the juices from the cucumber too. So if you do it on the cutting board, you have to have either a way of gathering those juices, or else you just grate it straight into your bowl so you don't lose any of the delicious cucumber flavor. Cool? Okay, all right, so let's go back and check on our veggies. Oh, before we do that, sorry, we got to cut up our coriander so we can have that ready to sprinkle on top. I think our veggies need a little bit longer anyways. So I'm just going to hack through this guy, get as much of it off this root ball as I can. We do not need them to be super tiny pieces, because I want to see them as like a nice sprinkle on top. Okay, so don't forget, with coriander you can go down through the stems, because they are very edible and soft enough. They're not fibrous. That's as far as I'm going to push that one. Okay, and this is equally delicious with mint. So if you've got either of those on hand, I would recommend including them. If you're in a pinch, you can add a bit of parsley too. I like a lot of herbs, but with the parsley, I'm going to be very particular to cut it really small. So this is how you do it. You got to bunch it up really tight, and then that way you can finely shave it. Okay. There we go. Just a little bit of parsley in with that. Okay, come on back. Let's add the sultanas and finish it off. Now you might ask, why are we adding the sultanas to the hot mixture as opposed to sprinkling them on top? I think this plumps them up and makes them a lot tastier when you actually bite into them. So I like to give them a chance to absorb some of the liquid that comes off the veggies and make them nice and warm and plump and juicy. Okay, so have a look at this. See how it's cooked down. I don't want it to be fully overcooked, so there's still a bit of crunch. Like I'm trying to squish that right now with my nail. It's not squishing and mushing in my fingers. I'm actually putting a fair bit of pressure, see? So we're pretty close there. We do not want to overcook this, keeping in mind it's going to continue to cook in the hot pot as soon as we add the rice. So I'll leave that up to you to decide how cooked you want it to get. But see, the cauliflower is still fairly hard. So that's we kind of don't want to push it too much here. Otherwise we're going to get overcooked mush. So at this point, let's check on the rice. Questions here, guys. Loving the coconut yogurt in dressings, Mandy. Awesome. Love the sauce recipe. Very cool. Oh, thanks, Adrian. Thanks. You're happy with me doing things on the fly. And hey, Lara, welcome. Haven't seen you in ages. Cool. And never any waste. Awesome. Oh, is Mia there? Mia, welcome. Are you cooking with me tonight, Mia? That'd be so cool if you're making your mom dinner. That would be, and dad. Is dad home? Amazing. That would be so cool. All right, let's check on our rice. I'm doing it. I lifted the lid. Here we go. It better be done. So it's going to look a little bit drier on top. We've got to go down the bottom and see if all of our liquid is absorbed. Yes, it is. Good. Okay, so we give that a fair little stir here. And what we'd like to have happen right here is that it's not 100% cooked. We want it about 90 to 95% cooked. So have a little taste of that. There should be just a tiny bit of chewiness in it. We don't want it to be al dente, but just a tiny little bit undercooked, so that again, once you combine these, they're not going to go mush and crazy on you. So does your guys' rice look like that? That's what it should look like, these nice individual grains. If it's been pre-soaked and then you've added the right quantity of water, then you don't have to worry about it. So we could have let this sit now for another 20 minutes and it wouldn't have overcooked. Okay, this is the magic in it. It's just there when we're ready to eat it. Now I'm really salivating, I'm ready, I'm hungry. So I'm gonna turn that heat right down to 1, if not 0. You can turn it off, everything's cooked now. All we need to do is combine the two. Okay, I'll add those two together. And in terms of timing your cooking and reducing your dishes, this next little trick works well to help steam off and clean the pots, and also then to cook my broccoli. So before I give that a stir, I'm going to quickly put a little bit of water into this. Actually, I'll just use this little bit of water. We do not need much to steam it. So even if you've got like a centimeter of water in the bottom, I'm going to crank that up to max heat. Put my broccoli on top. And then we can add some steamed broccoli to the dish after. So let's mix this up, and then we've got our vegetable biryani. So this is why I used a big pot. So if you guys are struggling in the pot that you've chosen, just transfer this into a bowl so you can do a proper mix. But there we go. We should have all the veggies stirred through it. And even if it still sits for a couple of minutes before you serve it, nothing was going to end up overcooked because we've been very careful to find that at the right stage. Okay, and as with any of the recipes that you guys are learning from me, it's only going to take making it maybe once or twice yourself to nut it out, to figure it out, how to make it easy every time. It just takes that couple of times of practice, guys. It's not like something that's going to take you 20 times just to get it decent, okay? You can do this. I promise you, you can do this. And that's why you guys are watching the videos. So that's even better. Okay, so now we all have to do is garnish it. I won't make you guys wait for the broccoli because that's going to be a little bit here, but this is the timing of the dish that I'm trying to help you guys learn the whole side of the cooking to it. So can this be a whole dinner? Depending on how many veggies you've added, depending on, I guess, how you define your dinner meal. If this is the absolute main meal of your day, you might want to make it a little bit more interesting, just for interest's sake. But if we've prepared our grains correctly, we've used good quality veggies, we've added as many veggies in as we can, then yes, there is actually a lot of value, a lot of protein in this, especially if you've gone to the effort of finding organic rice, for example, and really good quality ingredients. Quality is everything in my opinion. Then yes, you could have this as a meal, right? Again, maybe like I said, for interest's sake, you could be adding a couple other things in with it every now and then. I'm going to add the steamed broccoli. Some people might like to add one single skewer of roasted veggies or of prawns or of whatever else kind of thing you like to have with it. The sky's the limit. You could be doing tofu, you could be doing tempeh. You could have just chucked in a couple of beans if you wanted, or chickpeas. Chickpeas would be a delicious addition to that to really balance out even the different amino acid profiles of the food to get you the so-called complete protein, which is not actually true, but anyways, that's another topic for another day. How are we going, guys? It does smell good. You're right, Adrian. I love this smell-o-vision thing. That's the benefit of once you start cooking at the same time as the video, you'll get smell-o-vision too. Question, if this was done as a bulk meal, what's the best way to reheat it? Oh, that's such a good question, Adrian. Yes, okay. Definitely not in the microwave. You're so right. So what I would do to reheat rice is, ideally it's not still frozen, so it needs to be thawed, at least thawed from the fridge, okay? So I would be putting it in that same steamer basket that I used for the broccoli, unless it's got too big of holes. So if yours has really big holes, then get a hold of your fine sieve strainer. Ideally, a metal one is pretty important here. Put your amount that you want to reheat in the strainer, and then set that strainer over a pot. Now, a little bit tricky to figure out once is you have to kind of get it so that no steam can get out because you want the lid on top. So it might just take you figuring out the size of your pots and then finding a strainer that would sit into there. Nice fine sieve strainer. So you can just steam it above a little bit of water, same as I'm doing the broccoli. That will heat it up much faster than actually frying it, believe it or not, and then it's not going to overcook any of the bits as well. So that's kind of the healthiest way to reheat that, and I'm really glad you asked. It might only seem challenging or difficult until you have your setup figured out. And then as soon as you've got it figured out, you know that you need this pot, you use this strainer, you put this lid on, and boom, it's done in a matter of 3 minutes after the water boils. And really you only need that much water. Okay, so it's just so it doesn't boil dry. And then yes, you're right, such a good question, how do you reheat that? Otherwise, if you've slightly undercooked everything, then you can definitely reheat it a lot in the morning and pack it in a thermos. Pack it in a hot food thermos so you can take it for lunch or send it in the kids' lunches. I find this is often a really popular kid favorite if you don't add the hot spiciness. If you just add the mild curry powder and the turmeric and the garam masala, this is quite a kid fave. Okay, you guys are already eating, that's awesome. Well, you're making me drool, so I'm gonna have some too here. So I'm gonna put a little bit of my coconut sauce on top. I cannot forget the cashews. Oh, need that bit of crunch. Love that. Nice having a little sprinkle from our whole food jar. And eventually this might be devoured by the time I'm done with the broccoli, but that's coming next. So there we have it, guys, the Ashley version of a biryani Indian rice. I hope you love it. Isn't it full of beautiful vibrancy, I guess colors, yellow? And thanks for cooking along, those of you that were in there, and those of you that are just watching, then please post a photo when you do get around to cooking it. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time on Cook With Me Live. Night night.